Welcome to Superstition Mountain Mysteries. We're here today to pay tribute to Charlie LeSueur. And although I've only known Charlie for about a year and a half, and all my association was with the mysteries, we have two of his long-term friends here, Hank Sheffer and Jack San Felice. And I'm going to ask Hank here to give some stories about his association with Charlie.
Well, I can tell you, and thanks for that, Larry. Charlie was something else. I've known Charlie for so doggone long, more years than I can even remember. But I met him working through Larry John Wright. He was doing some shows there, and I was working out at Apache Land at the time, and also working with Mary Brown at the Festival of the West. And before we even got started out at Apache Land, we had a Q&A session that we always had at the Festival of the West, and Bill Rose had done that for years. Well, Bill Rose, not a very considerate fellow, he up and died on us, and so Charlie stepped in and took his place and did an admirable job. He knew so much about so many players, so many movies. He was actually dubbed the film Encyclopedia by Buck Taylor. Even Buck Taylor couldn't stump him. And so at any rate, he started working with us up there at the Festival of the West. And then we got together out at Apache Land. They were doing a show about the old town because it was about to close. And Charlie came out, and we just told stories and talked about movies. We talked about doing stunts. And then I tried to talk him out of doing a stunt, but he did it anyway. One of my other fall guys got shot and fell off the roof. And Charlie says, "Well, I want to do that." I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, because it's there, I guess." And I said, "Well, I don't want you doing what he's doing, but we'll give her a shot." And up on top of the building he went. Long story short, we shot him, and he came off the top of that building just like he'd been doing it all his life. And we closed the show with that, with him in the hole, and I closed the show of all things. Afterwards, I asked him, I said, "You didn't tell me you could do that." And he said, "Well, you didn't ask." And that's the way that one went.
Tell me how you met Charlie, Jack.
Well, funny that Hank should bring up the Festival of the West, because I was out here one of the Festivals of the West a long time ago, and I saw this young fellow. To me, he was a young fellow then, and he was talking to this movie star, and I said, he stopped, and he had a break in time. So I nudged him, and I said, "Who is that fella?" It was an old timer. He goes on to say, "Oh yeah, that was Red Berry. He made movies in 1930s, I believe." 1930s, my God, that was a decade I was born. I hate to say that, but I got to be talking with Charlie, and the man was phenomenal. He was, as Hank says, a walking. He knew all this stuff about Roy Rogers, the Lone Ranger. How many Lone Rangers were there? And he knew how many there were. Roy Rogers, how many horse triggers did he have? He knew all about that. He was a very knowledgeable guy, but I tell you what, I liked him from the minute I met him. Because he was an upbeat type of a person, and he was friendly. And he put you at ease, had a way of putting you at ease. And I love the old Cowboys. And I have a photo in my home of me and Roy Rogers. So meeting Charlie and seeing him at the festival, every Festival of the West, it seemed like, if I had a question, had a problem, there was Charlie. Festival of the West, Charlie. It seemed like they went hand in glove. So I knew that if there was a problem about doing something, I'd go see Charlie. We had a problem one time getting table space. So I was selling books, And they weren't going to give us table space in this where they allocated. Went up to see Charlie. Found him. He's talking to somebody about Cowboys as usual. I said, Charlie, you got a second? I said, I got a problem. I said, man, they sticking us way back over in the corner by the men's room. Come on. We got to do better than that. I said, we're local artists and or local book writers. I said, authors, we should be up a little bit closer to the action. And sure enough, he got us moved. So, and it wasn't a problem for him. He says, no problem. Next thing I know, we're moving. It was a special thing for me, something I never forgot. And Charlie was that kind of a guy, very enthusiastic about what he was doing. If you asked him a question about a movie or who starred in it 100 years ago, he could give you the answer. And not only would he give you the answer, but he was very enthusiastic about giving you the answer. And he even talked about stuff you didn't even ask him about. Right, Hank? He'd get on a roll, man. He couldn't stop. So I remember Charlie as being a friend. I remember Charlie as being a good guy. I remember Charlie as being knowledgeable about Cowboys of the West. I love the old silent screen guys, and he knew their names, knew what movies was in. And like I say, he knew all the data about it. One thing I didn't know a guy recently, this is recent, and I seen Lash LaRue. And I said, well, what was Lash LaRue's real name? He said his real name was Alfred, and he kept the name LaRue. But since they put a whip in there, he said they called him Lash LaRue. Just like to say, I was glad to meet a guy like Charlie. God bless him, and I hope he's up there riding some horse with some famous cowboy up in the sky.
As a producer with Mysteries of Superstition Mountain, it's been my privilege to work with Dave and Charlie. Charlie was, the only frustration I ever had was Charlie had so many irons in the fire. He was always so busy. It was difficult to coordinate between the speaker and us and Charlie. But when that camera came on, Charlie became a different person. And he responded just exactly the way it should be. It's our determination to continue Mysteries of the Superstition Mountain. And we've got a lot of great stories that are in the can, and we've got a lot more we're going to be telling. I never really thought much about my stories and involvement in the Superstition Mountains as something that anybody would be interested in. I just lived those things, and it just went on my way. But when Mysteries and Charlie and Dave and I got together and began to realize how our viewers accepted those stories, I just got more and more and more enthusiastic. And I think it's the greatest thing on the face of the earth to be able to tape these things and preserve them for history and for people to see. And I'm determined to carry on with it.
Well, I started studying about the Superstition Mountains 10 years before I came out here. And I started collecting books or copies, let me put it this way, copies of the old books that you couldn't find out here. And so I knew a lot about the mountains when I got here. And I hiked first. I was first in Arizona in 1973. But coming back to stay here in 1992, I just felt this was the place I wanted to be because the superstitions were there. And I love those mountains. And the stories of them are not all about treasure hunting. There's hundreds of stories about the mountains that deal with ranching, that deal with making movies, that deal with famous personalities, that deal with strange characters of the Superstition Mountains. And the legends, they go beyond belief. The stories, wealth immeasurable. But the people that you meet on the trails, you never know what you're going to get. That's part of the beauty. And then the beauty itself. In the springtime at poppies blooming, I'd rather be nowhere else than in those Superstition Mountains.
Jack, you're right. I mean, there was a sincere passion there. And ironically, with Charlie, our interests were really in the film. And while I'd come back out here writing a book about the superstitions, it wasn't about the mountain that he and I talked about. It was actually more of the movies, stunts that we did, dealing with the celebrities and whatnot. And then I had told him that I'd gone up into the mountain back in the late 60s. Oh, was the response I got. And he said, I was up there with the Boy Scouts. And then all of a sudden, the passion went to the superstitions. I had been there and I took pictures of some things that people rarely see. Tom Collenborn talked about them, about the Jacob Waltz's rabbit. I had pictures of that, the great bear, and all of these different things. The shadow of the prospector walking into the cabin up on the north side of Siphon Draw. And Charlie's eyes got big as number 11 fry pans. So we started talking about that. Well, long story short, as a very good friend of ours would say, I wound up writing several books on that, on the superstitions, one on Apache land. Charlie wrote 2 books, I know, because I published them, that dealt strictly with celebrities and people that he'd met on silver screen Cowboys, on the Hollywood Trail, and I guess the second printing went to Hollywood Trail. And there was a passion between the 2 of us that was just really wonderful, because we could walk onto a set to do a session, whatever it was about, and rarely did we have anything but a topic. And we could talk about anything, and would go on and on and on. And we had this propensity for throwing curveballs at each other. You never quite knew what was going to happen. We were doing a thing at Apache land, and he was asking about it. He says, you guys go through a lot of ammunition out here. And I said, yeah, but we use unbullets. And there was this conspicuous quiet for about a second dealing with unbullets. And he said, okay. And I said, well, Charlie, what happened? And I got him. For one time in a lifetime, I got Charlie. I said, what happened was, we were using real bullets for a while, and we got all of our extras out of Central Casting up in Phoenix. Well, Central Phoenix called us and said, you're using too many extras. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. We all decided we'll just go to the blanks then. And Phoenix Central Casting was happy, and Charlie knew that he'd been had. And it didn't get any easier after that.
Well, Hank, one of the things that are really great about the Superstition Mountains was that you never know who you're going to meet coming out of there or going in there. People from all over the world come here, and they come to look for the lost Dutchman mine, but 99 and 44 100s never get off a trail. You're never going to find. And they wouldn't know. Had no idea. And they would not know what gold looked like if they saw it.
You talk about funny stories. Charlie and I, once again, it seemed like for about 3 years, every time we turned around, it was Charlie and Hank, Charlie and Hank, Charlie and Hank, and Charlie and Hank. We were just doing stuff together all the time. And that was a good thing. It was a fun thing. But we got in a call. He was supposed to do something out at Apache land. And of course, I was all up for that. Had no idea what it was going to be. But we were out there. And what it turned out to do was we were going to get, as you say, all these people coming into town from all over the world. And we had that, we had the scaffold out there. And we were going to get pictures of people, just different people, and do interviews. Well, it never happened, because the first thing that came about was Charlie and I went out, and here's all these people up on the scaffold playing with this rope. we'd already had to nail the trap door shut so people wouldn't fall through it. But what we had planned to do was do a show where these people could see us, you know, like we always did. And so that came about, and here's all these people with their cameras around their necks. They're all Japanese. They'd come in on a bus. And Charlie and I are standing watching the guys do the show, and they translated what the guys were saying, and this town isn't big enough for the two. And we going, well, go for it, party. And they go on and translate everything. We started laughing. Charlie and I were losing it. We lost it so badly. We never got 1 inch of film. Well, we're shooting, you know, magnetic tape, but we didn't get one frame of film laughing so hard over this whole thing. It would have probably made a great film, I think.
Yeah, the Las Peralta mine story, we all looked out across there. I hadn't been there for 40 years, and you just, as you looked out across the desert, you didn't see the washes and gullies. It looked like, well, let's just take a straight line and go over there. And we got off in one of those gullies, and the brush was so thick you couldn't get out where we wanted to get out. We had to go well past it and then double back and work our way up towards the mine. Charlie was actually throwing up, and I was feeling pretty bad myself. You know, 80-year-old guys shouldn't be doing this stuff, I guess. But Dave was the first one to get to the mine. We had to climb straight up a 20-foot cliff to get to what was remaining of the path, and it took about 15 minutes for even Dave to get through the brush. And Charlie went down in the bottom of the hole, that old ladder down there. My legs were gone. I wasn't about to go down there. And that's all we ever heard from some people was that we must have staged this thing or something. But
you look like a self-sacrifice with the pictures I saw.
And on the way out, I took a terrible spill coming down a 60% slope, and my leg folded up underneath me and blew my knee out, and I couldn't even get up. And Dave come over, and I weigh 200 pounds, and he just reached down there and grabbed me and picked me up on my feet. And once I was on my feet, I could cripple out of there holding on the back of his backpack. Then it took about 2 hours to get out of there. And we were all feeling pretty bad. And, you know, Charlie had a dream about putting all this stuff together and getting these stories on tape, but you know, now it's become all of our dream. And Hank, what is it that Charlie always says?
He'd say, and that's just one more mystery of the Superstition Mountains.
And folks, all I can say is stay tuned. There's some better stories coming than you've ever heard yet.
The best is yet to come.
There you go.